Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ISCM's second virtual Town Hall, Egypt chapter. The series of this Town Hall series of discussing with planning heads, supply chain heads, and understanding supply chain in such a pandemic world started from India to Middle East, and now we are on with our series in Egypt and Turkey. The topic for today's discussion is reimagining the supply chain planning to build robust and agile supply chain networks of the future. And in a couple of minutes, our thought leaders will join to discuss the same. As an institution, we are into training, education, research, and consulting, and we offer certification and courses in the domain of supply chain, logistics, procurement, demand planning globally across. We also have leadership program, and we recently launched R4. Certain downloads for this platform. This platform is on listen-only mode, and you can type in your question on the right-hand side of the question section and send it to us, which will be answered post-panel. Let me go ahead and introduce you to the thought leaders for the day. We have Mohamed, Director Supply Chain and Plants Operations from Marico. We have Omar, the Supply Chain Practitioner. We have Abdelrahman, Supply Chain Head at Systems 1. We have Amir, who is India, Middle East and Africa International Trade Lanes Readiness Manager at PNG. We have Ahmed from Emcure. We have Dr. Rakesh Singh from Institute of Supply Chain. He's the chairman. And we have Shanmukh Singh, who is a supply chain passionate at Institute of Supply Chain Management. And I would request Shanmukh Singh to lead the discussion and request everybody to join the stage. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I would like to thank all the panelists for responding to my request of joining our webinar series. All the speakers across all the three webinars are showing immense enthusiasm, sincerity, and professionalism. I would also like to thank attendees for showing up today. Over the past few months, people everywhere have been worrying about the supply chain. Items have been out of stock for weeks. In crucial categories such as food, cleaning and sanitation supplies, and more critically, medical devices and safety equipment have been all over the news. At the same time, with most stores closed and most people staying home, demand for other types of products has fallen precipitously. Indeed, from what I heard, unlike many other Arab countries, Egypt did not try to impose a strict lockdown. There was a nighttime curfew. Busy spaces like restaurants and cafes were shut, but public transport was running, factories were humming, and shops kept at limited opening hours. Apart from region-specific repercussions, the pandemic has had global implications for trade, commerce, supply chain, and economics. This has led to supply chain plans and designs being evidently altered. Many organizations have dropped their SKUs by as much as 65%. That means key runners have been operationalized. On top of this, bi-monthly planning has been reduced to weekly or in many cases daily. Apart from this, existing demand baselines and even AI, largely machine learning based tools, no longer apply since consumer spending and production capacity has strayed from available historical trends. To come out of the crisis, SCM professionals are talking about two major characteristics a supply chain should have. First being resilience, and the other one is agility. Resilience is more around supplier risk and diversity, along with end-to-end supply chain capability to keep up with production, distribution, and logistics in case of VUCA events. Whereas agility or flexibility is how well equipped the firm is to respond to uncertainty in cases like the pandemic. Agility is a result of the digital transformation work already in progress in many firms. Digital transformation in many organizations has been accelerated as a result of the pandemic. Companies are working toward connecting supply chain devices, including some that are Internet of the Things enabled, automating processes, and leveraging the data collected. Agility is all about visibility and transparency. And this very same visibility and transparency are also promoting initiatives like sustainability, better workflow, and better workforce planning. So coming to the first question of the day, Abdelrahman, I would like to call you upon stage and talk
Hello.
about how the pandemic has affected your business in the facility management industry, and how did you leverage the supply chain function to turn around the pandemic to your benefit?
Thank you, Shanmukh, for your introduction for such a great panel. Thank you, everyone. Just a quick overview, the facility service, in our perspective here, what we are talking about is the housekeeping and the maintenance. And this get a lot of attention due to the pandemic status we are having. Okay, for the housekeeping and the maintenance or the facility service business, we have both positive and negative effects that came around. Okay, that came around. First, was the negatives. Let's start with the negatives that we're gonna talk about the positive more later. The negatives that we have is the cash liquidity. We suffered a lot from the cash status due to the Central Bank of Egypt new rules about withdrawal of amount of cash and stuff like this. Second, the reliability and the quality of the products that are introduced in the market, specifically from the sanitization point of view, like the hand sanitizer, like the alcohol, like the sanitization gear, stuff like gloves, safety boots, and extra. From other hand, the positives, as a facility service, we are introduced to a new type of business or a big area of business, which is the sanitization itself, because a lot of companies now, a lot of households, even homes, are being sanitized by the sanitization teams of our company. Gave us a little bit of edge in the market and give a lot of opportunity and a lot of cash flow later on, which somehow affected the cash liquidity I was talking about negatively. So it was somehow balanced from the business perspective. Okay. From the new services also, we had to introduce the sanitization gates, the sanitization products, also which created a lot of things that affected our supply chain. I see it positively, to be honest. Okay, this is what we are talking about, leverage and support of the supply chain. Okay. Hello, you are muted.
Thank you, Abdul. Let's move on to our next panelist for the day, Mohamed. I request you to come on screen. And my question to you is, what were some of the pain points in your supply chain in the first few months? I understand initial few months were the toughest for the FMCG industry, and you've seen supply shocks, demand bursts, anything that could disrupt our supply chain. So how was the first few months for your firm? You're muted, Mohamed.
Thanks first thing to the ISCM for having me, and I'm looking forward for a great webinar to come. Just back to your point, Shanmukh, definitely the COVID-19 was an eye-opening event that I would say have slashed any kind of safety nets and any kind of plan Bs and plan Cs that the corporates used to do due to the nature of the pandemic and the way the pandemic hits. The main issues that we, as well as the global market, received as a slash in demand and in supply, while in the same time a huge, I would say, shift in consumer sentiment from the discretionary item to some of the essential item, which is affected many of the companies. Back to your point, definitely we have, due to our business exposure to the foreign, I would say, import items is not that much, but still decent. So one of the items that kicked in, that the I would say the slashing and the interrupted deliveries coming from Europe and from Asia Pacific due to the pandemic issues. And you need to bear in mind that the Egyptian market came third or fourth in the lockdown period. So you have the first China mainly, then you have the Asia Pacific, then Europe, then Egypt. So definitely this is have a double down on the supply capability of our business and the businesses that are importing items from, in general, Asia Pacific or Europe. Having said this, I would say we were having a kind of some, I would say, policies that in place that have mitigated such a risk. One of those items that we are working as per consignment and safety stocks, utilizing the demand-driven MRP. So one of things that we are managing on demand base, since we have our portfolio divided into 3 categories: the runners, which is 70 to 75% of the turnover; repeaters, which is almost 15% to 20% from the turnover, and the rest is repeaters. Sorry, and the rest is strangers. That we were applying safety stock base and make to stock strategy in dealing with our distributors. So we are keeping every single month with the distributor 15 days and replenishing as per such a stock strategy. This helps us to keep our stocks as a distributor in case we will have any sudden demand. While on the other hand, on the supply base, we are utilizing in consignment strategy with our suppliers for the key items affecting our runners. So we are keeping 2 to 3 months worth of stock in our key distributors in Egypt. And luckily, as we were mentioning, we were discussing before the webinar, that the pandemic hit mainly on March and April, which is the starting of the second calendar quarter, at which we have replenished our stocks locally through the in-consignment strategy successfully. So actually, this has cushioned the impact on the I would say supply base, while the demand-based stocks were good to go. Then we were having another 2 things that we need to manage. First, that some of the key items that we were not having such luxury to build a local stock, either 3 in consignment or 3 import, which we have utilized through our shared sister company. We have a Marico very good thing that we are sharing the stocks through a shared, I would say, hub that we can check. So we have utilized the lockdown in India to take some of our sister companies' stock in order to utilize it in Egypt till our sister companies in India start over, which happened or still happening in July. Second challenge was the financial impact on our variable cost and fixed overheads, since we are not the demand came to a full stall. So our say variable cost was reduced while our fixed heads were soaring. So we started to have a negotiation with all our fixed overheads resources, starting from our renting, second from our service providers. On the other hand, on our variable costs regarding the labor, we started to have some agreement with the labor regarding a replacement in the vacation or pay as per attendance in order to manage the cash to cash cycle. Third item, in order to mitigate this as well, we started to get introduced to the new consumer sentiment products, which is the hygienic products. So we have managed a quick turnaround to introduce our hygienic and sanitizing products, because this was the demand, I would say, focus, and this was the cash, I would say, start of March, April till end of June, and still some of the residuals in July. So all this have, I would say, helped us to, I would say, foresee and have an agility and swift response to mitigate any measure on the business while coping with the consumer sentiment.
Thank you, Mohamed. We'll turn a new chapter away from supply chain in our next question. Amir, can you come on stage? Hello, Amir.
Yes, in a minute.
So, Ahmed, while global trade and globalization at large were recovering from the US-China tensions, the sudden occurrence of a pandemic and the following national lockdown has hit global supply chains. The WTO estimates 25% drop in global trade this year. The resurgence of local sourcing and nationalistic buying patterns in the previous few months haven't helped the cause. Could you give a brief account of your experience how global trade lanes and globalization will be disrupted for many months or even years to come?
Well, in this regard, you will see that the effect is the same. What my friend Mohamed mentioned before, the effect of the lockdown of the raw material suppliers, especially from China, China and India, they are supplying a big chunk of raw material along the world, especially for chemical-based industry, which one of them is FMCG, and also pharmaceuticals and a lot of other industries. Very important. The thing is, most of the companies have dealt with the crisis with whatever they could mitigate at the right. But in order for us to take this forward, we need to have some changes in our policy, in the strategy totally of the industry. It's not only a company will lean a little bit on more safety stock or more agile safety stock, more on supplier manages inventory, and they take a pull using demand. Those are all techniques that you can use that will keep you. But if any other force majeure happens like this, because yes, we learn from the crisis, but force majeure, you cannot take every single learning because you don't know what is going to happen next. But there are certain things that I think we learn from this, which is, for example, for the last couple of decades, we thought that globalization is the best thing, centralization is the best thing because you leverage the scale, you introduce quick solutions, reapplications between sister companies, like Mohamed said, and definitely for multinational companies, if you are supplying one site of your of a company, you are directly a validated supplier for the rest of the company. So globalization brought a lot of good things. It removed the boundaries from the across the countries with the free trade and all of such things that was very helpful. This
Thank you,
also
Ahmed.
led. Yeah, I didn't finish my point.
You ended.
This also led to more of centralization. When such issue happens, if this center is locked down like China, then the rest will suffer. What I'm talking about is that we need to change how we deal with centralization. We need to make small centers across the globe. We depend more on local suppliers, not definitely local suppliers, but the big company, they can open places in Egypt, they can open places in Kenya, in Saudi Arabia, in Morocco. They have small hubs that in such cases, they are able to be very close to their customers. They are able to be also very close to their suppliers. So a bit of localization in the essence of globalization, I think this will help. Also generalization. Generalization means a lot of material or a lot of end product or semi-finished can use less of raw material items. This will help you reduce your inventory. This will help you as well retain big chunk of inventory for 70 or 80% of your product portfolio. This will help you overcome any such crisis.
Thank you, Amir. Next up, we call Ahmed, who brings a perspective from the pharmaceutical industry. Supply shocks and demand synchronization have posed many challenges to supply chain planners. What are the sort of vulnerabilities that the pandemic has exposed in pharma supply chains?
First of all, thank you, Shanmukh. Thanks to ISCM. I have to say, of course, we had our challenges the same as people in other industries that they were talking. We had the challenges in production capacities due to the lockdown in India. There was a shortage in supply due to that. We had challenges, of course, in logistics due to the airports were closed. So we had to go by sea, so longer lead time for our products to reach the markets as we're working in GCC and different markets in French West Africa, and Afghanistan, Pakistan. So we have, of course, we suffered due to the pandemic, which has hit global trade and investment in an unprecedented speed and scale, as we know. So yes, we had these problems of course, and because we are working in tenders business, so we need to have our products reach the market on time, or we will be penalized. And we are working both in tenders and in regulated markets. Also, that we had for regulated markets, we had to carry more stocks to meet the disruption in demand. So we had to take, of course, some measures for tenders. We had to go, for example, for air. So this was increasing cost, but we were reducing the penalties that we're going to make. For others, regulated markets that we have running SKUs in, we went for C and worked with our suppliers to increase the amount of orders and increase the safety stock to be able to meet the disruption in demand. This is the quick fixes that we made, and of course in the next section we'll be talking about other stuff on how for long run to solve this issue. You're muted.
Unmute yourself.
Thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you.
Next we come to Omar. Omar, can you switch on your camera? Consumption patterns have changed drastically over the course of the pandemic. This started off as a consequence of national lockdowns, but has moved on to become a demand depression majorly because of issues like availability of cash in hand, job losses, pay cuts, etc. How can the supply chain function help organizations to adapt to this sudden change in consumer buying patterns, and what are the constraints in doing so? Omar, over to you.
Hello, hi Shanmukh. Hi, I would love to thank you for this amazing webinar and being part of this amazing group of panelists. So first of all, demand was fluctuating because there was no pattern that we can follow. As you know, demand is a reflection of the behavior of the target market. Once the behavior and the pattern was abrupt and disrupted, we were basically pushing on the readiness of the company, looking at our resources and making sure that they're up and ready. As you know, demand is basically the historical data and the market insights. Neither of one that we can rely because the historical data was fluctuating and the market insights was insufficient because of the panic mode. Even the perception of the basic necessities in life had started to change. I would like to put them in 3 stages. The first stage was the panic mode. People were losing their jobs, job cuts everywhere, food and hygienic supplies were thought to be scarce. The second stage, where the demand started to pick up, was the self-soothing mode and the self-soothing part. People were just frustrated, depressed, started a bit to be in denial, pressure started to build up. So people were just buying to elevate their moods and feel that the world is still going on. And for the first stage is the normalization stage. That I would say that it's the stage that we're in where things are starting to pick up pace and we can start resuming our life again. Truly, it's a market shift. Underdogs are taking market leaders are falling. So the whole market has fluctuated based on the demand. And as I told you, it's not about the futuristic plans that we always put and which we always work against. It was more of your readiness, and this is the true meaning of agility. Even the performance measures, they should be business value rather than plan conformity. So all the plans were put aside. We had to basically go down to the deepest level of looking at, going back to Pareto's concept and looking at the 80-20 rule, knowing that 80% of the effect is caused by 20% of the cause, which is in our case, we had to look back at 20% of the SKUs that would impact our business profitability with 80%. And these SKUs were the ones that we started playing on, securing their safeties, securing, in other words, investing in them, making sure that their suppliers are up and running, making sure their suppliers, the quantities, their MOQs are up, their operating times. We have to find logistical solutions, backups, sourcing alternatives, even activating the alternate sources of supply, fast tracking qualifications, understanding the cash situation, understanding the cost situation, and even on the people level, mentally and psychologically, operationally, because at the same time, every day that they're working, they're just fearing if anything can happen to their families. So psychologically, they're impacted. So yeah, we had to dig deep to the functionality of things to make things happen. It was the survival mode. You're muted, Shanmukh.
Yvonne, can we have the poll now? Everyone today is talking about digitalization of the planning function. A technology revolution is on the cards. New tools like IBP, connected planning, DDMRP, SNOP are changing paradigms in the supply chain planning function. According to a report, close to 85% of companies today are using cloud compute. Advances in AI, IoT, and blockchain are also showing good promise. Additionally, control towers are becoming the center of all the things supply chain as organizations are increasingly adopting technology. I think IBP and connected planning are gonna win. Can we have Dr. Rakesh Singh to talk about all these technologies and how they interplay with the organization structure?
All right. Thank you, Shanmukh. And hello to all my fellow panelists. I think as we have moved into planning has been a very advanced element of supply chain, which aligns supply chain across the different segments, right from the supplier to the customer. And what you see is that we started with an MRP, which defined the bill of material, to today we are talking about an autonomous connected planning, which essentially connects the every node of the supply chain, starting from the customer to the dealer to the distributor to the depot to the factory to the supplier and to the sub-supplier, trying to build a very strong visibility into the system. And this visibility is supposed to provide a kind of understanding so that the whole planning can be made more agile. While we have been having ERP, then EDI, then we had APOs, and now this autonomous cloud-based technology, we had two developments which were very essential. And that was SNOP and IBP. IBP is nothing but extended SNOP, and SNOP is nothing but a short horizon IBP. And what you saw is that they clearly understood that it is not only technology, ERP, IT system that matters, but how organizations work. So if you see, the supply chain planning has taken a center stage in most better of companies in the world today, which have a portfolio review. So saying which product is doing well. In pandemic, there was a huge category consumption changes, as all of you said. That needs to be given to the demand planning review. When it goes to the demand planning review with the forecast baseline, you add sales and marketing as well as new product portfolio. Then it goes to supply review. In the pandemic, all of you have been saying very well that China or India or UK, wherever you source from, is a very risky proposition. You need to diversify across the globe and also have alternate supply bases which are more secure. And whenever there's a pandemic or natural disaster, you move to this. In fact, they realize that when people heading these functions come together and they see the same forecast X or sense demand X, then it is very good. In fact, nowadays there's another cognitive tool that is really doing well is DDMRP. It is based on common sense. It says that whatever with the market supply, I create different nodes, I keep inventory everywhere, I take the average daily use of the product and use it. So I think to give a sense and a direction and to give agility, efficiency, leanness, and to help reserve cash flows and help reduce working capital and make more sustainable aligned organization, these tools are very important. And I think this is why you see a lot of people are talking about use of blockchain, which can be the backbone. Internet of the thing can be sensor connect everything. You can automate your processes and use analytics to get insight and let your autonomous planning dictate what needs to be done rather than people and partners and businesses. And businesses and partners collaborate to make this happen. So this is what is my take on connected planning and IBP and SNOP, Shanmukh.
There's a lot of debate between agility-based planning and forecast-based planning. Agility, especially in today's VUCA world, seems to have caught the attention of supply chain professionals. My first question is how technology helps us make our supply chains robust and agile. Any two panelists can answer this question.
I will start, Shanmukh. So in order to take your question, let me continue on what the doctor have mentioned. I actually right now, in order to, it takes 5 pillars for any corporate to start, I would say, shift to the future. This is how I can say it. The first, that the leadership need to have a kind of emergent and embracing leadership for a change. This is becoming imminent, and there is no change without the leadership. Second, we need to apply resilience and agility supply chain strategy. And this is involving definitely the bionic supply chain and all the artificial intelligence and industry 4.0 enablers. Third point is the diversification. Diversification in the product portfolio that the company is offering and the supply base that the company is working with. Definitely, due to know-how, you cannot have a switch or just a turnover from export to localization in a nutshell. But you need to have a future strategy for the real items that you need from a corporate and industrial perspective. You need to have know-how in and to start localize or nationalize this benchmark in order to keep the edge and avoid any kind of risk. And the entrepreneurship and the way the entrepreneurship works in the new decade can help close such industry and capability gap. Fourth point is the digitalization and industry 4.0 board. Each corporate, from a Amor's perspective, need to have a digitalization and digital transformation board, not only just members. The board is having a commitment and accountability and driving each kind of corporate strategy towards diversification. The fifth is the sustainability. How you are not only the environment sustainability and footprint, we're talking about the sustainability in terms of sustaining gains and how you are managing step by step the change between the current, I would say, analog semi-digital to a full digitalization process. Those are the top 5 pillars. Having said this, right now we have a quick wins. Most of the corporates that are utilizing ERP, you have a huge data. Yes, you are not into the deep learning, but you have the initial stage. You need to start bundling this, I would say, data with a kind of intelligence through deep learning. And such intelligence is the AI arm in the supply chain, and start to have the connected planning as exactly what the doctor mentioned between the different, I would say, a chain in the supply chain. This is started heavily in Middle East and in Gulf area in retail, not industry. In retail right now, you have many MRPs and you have many, I would say, semi-AI frameworks that are tracking the demand and making all the replenishment and all the MRP end-to-end, till the tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers in order to ensure that demand have been met. So this is, I would say, all the ARP that we have and all that what we are doing as a forecast, like exponential smoothing or whatever, those should be a building blocks to have a complete AIE framework that relying on the deep learning and relying on the modern strategies in order to start automizing and creating the agility and swiftness in this. Having said this, supply chain is not only about planning and demand. You have the operation side from supply chain, which is crucial. Because right now, unless you have the operation capability, I'm talking about the manufacturing operations capability, you will not have such a smoothness and I would say changeover and such an agile model. So part of this is the Internet of Things. First is how we can have an agile and a quick turnover through the modern technologies. Second, how we can utilize the IoT in terms of machines and diagnosis and the link between the machine capacity and production planning in order to optimize the production capacity while we are maintaining the same quality and operation excellence. All these pillars should be met under one umbrella of a total and one strategy that drives the corporate, I would say, face or true north from the current practices, best practices that we have just talked about, to the new norm post-pandemic.
Thank you, Mohamed. I think you summarized the whole answer to the question very well. Does any panelist want to add any more points? Okay, moving on to the second question. How the effectiveness of this agility we are talking about is also determined by how we collaborate within the organization as well as with our end-to-end supply chain partners, that is suppliers, distributors, and also 3PL partners? And what are the roadblocks we are facing in being married to our supply chain?
I would like to answer. Hello?
Sure. Yes.
Yes. So basically, agility here plays a great role. So it gave us the opportunity to think and act in a new, unfamiliar way. And as Einstein once said, great opportunities lie within the crisis. In the midst of crisis lies great opportunity, right? So getting your people synergized, collaborating with different departments is the key thing to get out of this. If we only look at supply chain as a function, we couldn't get out of this alone. We had to look at the financial side of things. We had to look at the marketing side of things. We had to look at it from a consumer point of view. If we just look at ourselves, it won't work. And also for the people, knowing your people, like for leaders, leaders should know their people and know their leaders, know their behaviors. In pandemics, people's reaction change. And there's something very interesting, which is like utilizing the DISC tool. The DISC tool utilizes the resources that you have and puts people in behavioral forms. So you as a leader can make sure that you're putting the right resources in action. So, for example, you put someone that falls in the steadiness part, and you're expecting that he's going to function in a pandemic. No, he would need more time than the dominant character. So you need to know your people. For all the leaders, this is a very important key thing. The relationship with the suppliers. It has to be a win-win situation. It's a part where I cannot only win and you lose. It has to be, we can only survive together, not alone. And when I say synergizing with people, not only the department, not only the company, but your customers and your suppliers, right? Localization is a key thing, and I'm sure that a lot of my panel colleagues and panelists stated this. Localization is key for our economy, for our sustainability of the business itself, and going the extra mile, which is basically even supply chain professionals should know more about finance and marketing and sales, and that you need to go beyond what you know. We can't live in silos, right? Agility, we as supply chain leaders, supply chain departments, we contribute to 50 to 60% of the P&L. 50 to 60% is COGS. If we're not agile, the company does not have a chance. So agility is not an optional thing for supply chain leaders. It's a must for the survival of this company. Yep.
Thank you, Omar. Any other panelists would like to answer this question? Okay, we move on to our next question. How important is sound inventory management in case of disruptions like the pandemic? How do we plan incoming and existing inventory in the next few months and further?
I would like to have a quick insight on this, Shanmukh, if I can.
Sure.
There are a lot of inventory models that we can definitely apply. And this is not, I don't think this is the question, which inventory model we should use, rather than how can we be more prepared in case of such pandemic or such crisis like this, which again return me to how to structure most of our production within the industry to have general material, less material, so to have less diversity of the material with high diversity of the product. This will help a lot having less inventory SKUs. So within the same cache or within the same inventory numbers, you can have more of your safety stock that can cover more time to you. Plus, the part that I said about localization, especially for raw material supplier, this will help a lot, creating hubs across the important areas of the region. That will also help a lot. But if we want just to go and increase the inventory or lean up on it, because when you are studying the inventory, you study the points across the last 12 months, across the last 18 months, and normally when you have a very high point or a very low point, you exclude them because they are not representative on the normal behavior. So this is what you take into consideration when you are planning or building your inventory insights for the coming period. This will not help because normally this pandemic, you will take it out of your calculation if you are really calculating your inventory model in the coming year or the coming 6 months. The thing is more about changing the strategy of having more diverse suppliers. This portfolio of raw material, which does not increase the cash, also have good deals with the supplier, who have localized supplier, and the supplier manage the inventory and own the inventory sometimes, so it reduces the cash liability or the liability on the company itself, while you still committed to the raw material of the supplier. I think this will help a lot, giving any company the ability to overcome such huge surge in inventory by positive or negative.
You are
Unmute.
mute.
Thank you, Ahmed. Is there any other panelists who would like to answer this question?
Yeah, I'd like to add quickly here. Of course, the point of Mr. Amir is very valid, especially that we have to look also to share risks, like to outsourcing options, going to 3PL logistics. This is very important in this time. This will help us reduce the lead time for our products to reach quickly, moving from centralization, like Mr. Amir was saying, to decentralization, having warehouses very close to our consumers, to reach our consumers quickly. This will help us avoid, like Mr. Amir was saying, building up stocks till we reach the point of having dead stocks or high expiries and all. And of course, we'll be using first expiry, first out, or first in, first out logistics. This will be part of the solution for inventory management that I would like to add, especially in this point. Of course, we'll be also depending more on real-time data, not on past historical trends, because currently there is a lot of disruption in demand. So this we must be depending on real-time data, more technology to ensure that we are replenishing with the right quantities and the right time. Yeah, that's it. That's the point that I like to add, of course, on Mr. Amir, valuable points.
Shanmukh, I want to come in here and just look at 2 or 3 things. I think Ahmed has made a very valid point that during the time of such crisis, you need to be securing your transportation, securing your warehouses, and securing your supplies so that you can reach the demand where demand comes from. Now, this is one thing that is very different and very, yucca kind of situation which arises during the pandemic. If you look at your first question on agility and forecasting, it is very important for us to realize that forecasting cannot be used today because the past is no indication of the future. So in case you are building your inventory based on any forecast, I think that is out of place. Do you build your inventory based on your sales order data? Maybe yes, but that also is changing based on the nature of the pandemic and how the lockdowns are, how the world behaves through the length of the pandemic. So, how do you really manage your supply chain? I think one of the best things that DDMRP approach says is that, and I think it sits in a very good model. If you see, what you have to do is that you have to break your manufacturing lead time and cumulative lead time, which are too long, which allows you to keep a huge safety stock in such situation. And I think Amir was saying that if you decouple them on strategic points, so what you do is that you reduce the inventory at many points, but you have some amount of surety of what is needed. And I think this is why DDMRP became very interesting in this point of time. Second thing is that as we move ahead, inventory management will become very important. And I think agility and forecasting will have no option. I think people forget that agility and forecasting has to be debated very differently. What is agility? Your ability to react to the market at the fastest. What is forecasting? Your past data and past intelligence and insights. What is your sales data? Your current insight. What do you do? In your demand plan, you use forecasting as a basis for baseline this thing, and you use sales and marketing intelligence and sales order to correct that, including your correction from factory, as someone was rightly saying. So you get in demand, you actually sense a demand in a better way. And using your forecasting and using your sales order together, even today will help, because you have seen the data in the last 2 months. Data shows a pattern of erraticity, but it shows a certain intelligence that this is how the market is behaving. So what do? If the market is behaving in a very erratic manner, you have a war room kind of situation where all functional areas, as Omar was saying, come together and they decide what is to be sent. So as Ahmed said, we have to go to the lowest point. This hyperlocal planning has to be done. Today, there is a need for a hyperlocal planning because you need to be there, otherwise you will lose your business. But tomorrow, when things start becoming normal, when we are transitioning to the next normal, I think we need to realize that we need to base a very good network planning based on forecasting and sales order data, which essentially decouples the supply chain to a great extent, so that you don't have an inventory point only once in one place and then one at the supply place, so that there's a huge safety stock that you need. I think building up DDMRP with other approaches like IBP will help people to plan their supply chain better. Thank you. That's it from me, Shanmukh.
Very good insight, Dr.
Rakesh. Now I'd like to move on to a new chapter in the webinar. Sustainability is certainly an important issue in all its aspects, be it financial, operational, economic, as well as environmental. In fact, it is proven that environmental sustainability can boost sustainability in the other three aspects. Thus, I would like to pose a question. How can better planning help us fight the crisis at hand and build sustainability in our supply chain, while also reducing waste and mitigating risk transmission to the community at large? This will be an open discussion for all panelists.
Shanmukh, I would just like to state something. We always overlook the waste. By utilizing the waste, we can definitely improve environmental sustainability and even boost our revenue streams. Many projects were based on that, and it's a great aspect for the business. Not only from a business point, but even from your consumer's point of view, from your supplier's point of view, from your financial's point of view. It's definitely a thing that every company has to consider for this. I just wanted to stress on that point.
Okay. Any other panelists wants to add?
Yes, Shanmukh, I would like to reflect on what you have just mentioned. As I would say, sustainability is need to be reflected on many, I would say, aspects. One of the aspects is the product aspect. During, I would say, the design for Six Sigma, you need to consider the sustainability impact. So starting from the product needs to be sustainable, and you need to minimize the product footprint and the impact on the environment. This is the starting point from a Amor's perspective to have a real green supply chain, I would say, cycle. Second point is the logistics supply chain. All what has been mentioned by you, by the doctor, by the whole of the respectful panelists, that showing that as long as you are moving more and more to conscious, I would mention just in time, plus the more you are having less footprint or negative footprint on the society and the sustainability. So having having the goods right beside the point of use, having the supply right beside the manufacturing facilities, all this reorganization and redesign of the supply network will help to slash timing and the connection and improve the on-time in full, while as well considering a lesser and greener impact on the society and on the sustainability level. I would say third point is the community based. Each corporate, I would say, from supply chain perspective, need to mind the community and need to mind the impact on its supply chain and need to see a counter and offsetting measures. Part of, I would say, the opportunity in disguise that the COVID have generated the positive impact on the environment, despite all odds. But this is an opportunity in disguise. You have many good gains that happened because of the lockdown that you will take years and years to accomplish for the normal life to life, I would say, trend. So we need to be conscious, we need to be accountable, and we need to exploit such opportunity to build on the new norm and not get back to the, I would say, previous abuse of the environment. Last thing is the zero net emission. The zero net emission is something that you need to consider your supply chain impact in the design and in the products, in the raw material, and as well your countermeasures as a strategy from the corporate perspective regarding the green areas and regarding what is a strategy to offset such impact on the sustainable aspect and on the environment till you are able to generate a zero-free supply chain cycle without any kind of impact on the environment.
You are muted.
You're muted.
Can I have one more panelist to talk on this?
Should I come in?
Yes, Dr. Rakesh.
I think sustainability and your question is very well balanced with planning, because let us look at sustainability in terms of sourcing side. You know that I think Mohamed spoke about all other functional sustainability at the factory and logistics side. Let me look at something on the supplier side. What you see essentially is that we do not know who produces what, because as we know, all supply chain professionals, that our bill of material has certain products, who has another bill of material and who has another bill of material, which are prepared by tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, tier 10, tier 13 suppliers. Now, one of the biggest challenges to sustainability is that, do we know which particular tier of supplier is sustainability compliant? Is he actually able to understand sustainability, and what is the sustainability compliance in a big way? I think there are two things that we really need to look at in terms of sustainability. One is environment, another is social. We don't employ child labor, we don't exploit human labor, we don't exploit, gender, and hence, how do we understand that we are sourcing and have a complete trace and tracking of what we are using in our this thing? And this is why it is a double sword, and IBP or maybe autonomous planning. What companies like Resilink or Lamasoft use is that they use geographical dispersion of supplier. They map the supplier, they map their companies, and they have enough information on these companies to supplier and sub-supplier in the last tier supplier to know whether they are sustainable, they are adopting the practices. If you can do this in the food industry, maybe Marico in India is really a very good example of that. You then actually become very, very compliant to the new age business dynamics through the ESG. Similar is on the front track. If you have a technology which captures drivers, captures the sleep deprived drivers, you capture this thing. This is also a sustainability, because, and then you have a great orientation toward energy efficiency with green energy and lower consumption on the soft floor, and making the soft floor more compliant with more environmental friendly product. Sustainability can be a big example. I would say that, as I said, marketing, logistics. They are part of the IBP. Sustainability should be a major part of the IBP because the world planning and world supply chain and world businesses are moving towards sustainable business. And I think environmental social government norms are now complying on major industries throughout the world as a global governance mechanism. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Rakesh. Sorry, Shanmukh. I would just like to add, Dr. Rakesh, that we have two things. In Marico, part of supplier assessment is in the agility matrix, it's a sustainability score. We have a sustainability score for each supplier and driving an action plan with him. Second point is the sustainability is a cost, I would say, friendly. The sustainability, I would say, as long as the supplier is, I would say, growing and more sustainable, he can generate a better and competitive prices, which is win-win for him and for the customer, regardless of the customer, and vice versa. The increasing waste, I would say, is lose-lose to the supplier. So it is not a winning strategy whatsoever to disregard the sustainability from even the price consideration, in addition to the environment consideration as well.
Yes, that's good.
But I'd like to bring for sustainability another perspective, which is the local manufacturing. Basically, I think we mentioned this already, but I want to stress it that a lot of industries across the world were based on China and on India, specifically for the Middle East, based on the raw material and packing material. One of the main conformity of the sustainability is the raw and packing material to succeed the industry itself, to make sure that the operation will stay running. And of course, I'm echoing my friend Ahmed about the green supply chain concept. So how can we make sure that we can sustain our supply chain and our operation with the raw and pack material from local manufacturer within the international standard, and of course mentioning our responsibility towards the environment. Corona, one of the positive of COVID-19 was the maintenance of the environment that happened naturally with much appreciation towards the Mother Earth. So that should be mentioned as a broader mind, not detailed one.
Moving on to our last question for the day. A bionic supply chain brings the best of both worlds together to solve complexities and face challenges. This makes people the center around which we are able to create an organization. We all depend on the seamless bionic supply chain function to help smooth running of day-to-day operation. Thus, this brings me to my final set of questions for the day. How do you plan your workforce? What skills do you look for in your employees? How do you help your employees reskill themselves through reskilling programs in wake of such supply chain disruptions? And how important is employee turnover as a key performance indicator?
Well, Shanmukh, I can have a quick insight on this one. When we are talking about integrating technology with planning, most of the new fundamentals is talking about artificial intelligence or whatever, data mining, all those sort of things. And sometimes it makes the people shake or feel the risk of that. This old risk when we started creating the steam engine, when people started to think that the machine is coming to take our jobs, and we started to fight it instead of embracing it. And once they are embraced, and we started to get revolution in the industry, and more jobs to be created. So it's not always that the machine is coming to take your place, rather than how you can develop yourself or adapt, so you can again become the master of the machine, or the new machine, or the new tool. Because if any machine, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it is a simple tool that the primary human just invented to crack rocks, these are machines, they are tools for you to use. Reflecting on the supply chain, it's rather we need to start looking for changing that the planner work. So now we have a supply planner, we have a production planner, a raw material planner, a DRP planner. And instead of that, we need to have a production analyst, someone that will use the machine, will use a lot of data, will use the artificial intelligence and the mining and everything in reports that comes to him every day and insights, and then he will be able to analyze all this data and take the right decision for the good of the supply chain or his company. So I think this is a paradigm shift that we need all to embrace, and we need to work on to reach this fast, because once we reach this fast, we'll get a lot of learning, and we will also be able to develop a lot of the machine, which is I like the word that you put here, a bionic supply chain, which is like the $6 million man part machine and part human.
Not my word. It's not my word.
It describes it very well.
Thank you, Ahmed.
I would like to also, sorry, is Ahmed speaking? Hello?
You can go ahead, Omar.
Go ahead, Omar.
Hello? I would like to also say that Amir's points are very valid, and I would like to stress also on that we need layers and layers of data. Like, we can't only plan according to the behavior of our customers. We need to know further and further so we can plan to create demand, if I may say. We can't be always reactive. We need to be proactive in order to introduce new products, introduce new initiatives. Also, for the teams, for the reskilling part of the teams, it's very important, as I stated earlier, to know our teams, to know the capabilities and playing to their strengths. People are different. Different is good. Diversity is amazing. We just need to, as leaders, put it in the right place, put everyone in the right form and shape, so we can make everyone thrive and grow. And that's our role, I think.
Thank you, Omar. Abdelrahman, you can go.
Yes, I'd like to echo Omar on this. Yani, we need to keep everyone in the team involved. Everyone opinion is listened to. Everyone is respected on whatever the idea or the question they are giving. Of course, we need a lot of leaders in such situation, but we need also observers that they can observe the situation around us, not just the supply chain. The whole module, the marketing module, the political module, the medical module, process in the COVID-19 and because we are not just a planner that plan according to an Excel sheet. Now we are affected by a lot of variabilities. So we need from our team, and of course we will onboard them and help them accordingly to look at a holistic view for the whole situation and the whole image in the market specifically, and the country, the total country, and of course the world. This will help a lot of making leaders and next to decision makers on the near future.
Yeah. Unmute, please.
Thank you, Abdelrahman. Mohamed, do you have something to add? Your voice is interacting with your phone. Your laptop and phone are interacting, so we cannot hear anything.
I disconnected my phone already. I'm not connecting to my phone.
Some disturbance from somewhere else. You can continue now.
Very well. So I was just mentioning that I concur and echo all my sincere panelists' view, and I would like to double down on the human capital, because I would say, okay, with the systems, everything will be great, but as long as you have the right human capital, you will not exploit the systems and the capability as well of the system. So first, we need, my recommendation, to have a learning agility mindset. We need to have a concept for the learning agility, either to be embedded in the culture of the corporate or as a key selection criteria of any newcomer. So learning agility is a key, because we have a different and day-to-day challenges, and that unless you have the learning agility, you will be having a barrier and glass ceiling to understand and as well evolve. Second point, the growth mindset, the sky is the limit. The limited mindsets becoming a barrier in human capital, especially with the unprecedented technology and the I would say the progression in the artificial intelligence and the adoption rate of many of the users, that definitely unless we have the right growth mindset, we will hit a barrier. Third point regarding the competency evolution and how the competency of the agility and artificial intelligence should be integrated in the competency platform and the competency matrix of the corporate, at which we have the assessment, we have the training, and we have the development plan, in order to, back to your point regarding the organization, to have an agile and above all capable organization to deliver the expectations from, I would say, from the stakeholders and from the market. Last but not least is learning how to manage a single purpose team. The single purpose team right now, virtually, and with single purpose, because right now you cannot manage production alone or quality alone. You need to have a single purpose. Back to Abdelrahman's point, I totally concur with his point that you cannot segregate or have a different islands right now. Unless you have a single purpose team, you will not be able to manage and deal effectively with the current challenges.
Yeah. Unmute, please.
Unmute as usual.
Mohamed, thank you so much. Amir, do you have the point to add?
I'd like to add just a single quick point to all. Of course, all the team has added great points. It's just that this brings the best of what both machines and humans can offer, but this bionic supply chain. But this has to be endorsed by top management. This is very important. If it's not endorsed by top management, it will not go well. It has to be applied on as a project on stages, so that there is no resist to change. As you know, when there is a change in the environment, there is people resisting this change, thinking that, as my colleagues mentioned, that thinking that this will make them lose their job. But this is not right. Of course, this is here to increase the revenue. It should increase the revenue by around 4 to 6% as per statistics.
I actually have those.
Reduce the working capital. A lot of gains for this project. So this has to be introduced by and endorsed by top management, so that everybody understands that this will not make anybody lose his job. And it is change that the only constant is change. So people must embrace this change and not like block the change or stop the change, fearing that they're going to lose their job. That's a point that I wanted to add.
Thank you, Ahmed.
That's a great point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed. So we come to the end of our session. I would like Dr. Singh to give some closing remarks and Jaisal Tanna to give the vote of thanks. Thank you.
All right. So I think planning is going to be very important in the next decade. As we go from pandemic to post-pandemic, short run and the long run. In the short run, we need to use the data in the pandemic and project scenarios and work around those scenarios through the war room, through our integrated tactical planning, which becomes a part of a larger IBP planning. We need to use the principles of DDMRP, where we can actually look at the notes in this such period. But in the long run, we need to really start investing, as everybody has been saying, into a technology with a blockchain back this thing. Use data insight and visibility, both at the same time, AI and this thing, and secure your supply bases, secure your supply, secure your production, secure your transport and warehousing based on one single number, which is either a sense demand with a multiple use of data points, including AI, ML based or deep learning based data. And if once you have this, all organizations are bionic. And that means you need to very well network with and collaborate with your partners, both suppliers on the inbound side and distributors and dealers on the outbound side. You need to network with 3PL companies. You need to network within a company with all cross-functional excellence, where everybody works together and sees one number, so that there is a complete visibility of schedules and part, and everybody start working on those numbers. So even if there's a pandemic, one can actually effectively control the risk. So thank you all of you for giving a little insight into Egypt's supply chain dynamics post-pandemic. And I hand it over to Jason.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the thought leaders and speakers today. Thank you, Mohamed, Omar, Abdul, Arif, Ahmed. Thank you, Shanmukh, and thank you, Dr. Singh. It was indeed an insightful session and a good takeaway for the audience. I would also like to thank all the attendees for being a part of our town hall, and do attend the next one, which is next Monday on 27th. We will send you the email and invitation for the same. Thank you, entire ISCM team. Thank you, Shanmukh and Yvonne, for making this happen. And do visit us on social media. Thank you.